And as the Indian came by with the snake held between his teeth, the snake bit the white man. Well, there was a moment of very great consternation. The dance was temporarily suspended, and the Indian came forward and said to this man, "If you will give us your word of honor that you will never tell what we do, we'll fix it so you're all right." So he agreed, and they took him down into the kiva and performed the snake ritual for him. He would never tell what happened, but in an hour or two it came out perfectly well. They knew how to do it. Something that you don't see that is quite as fantastic as that, of course. I saw one of the Gallup festivals years ago while it was still functioning in full force, and that's the feather dance. In the feather dance, a group of Indians form a circle and place a fairly large woven basket in the center of the circle, and in this they stand a highly decorated eagle's feather that has been enlarged, and it has little flangs and tips and tassels hung on it in this basket. They then sit in a circle around it and start chanting. And after a certain length of time, no one is within 10 or 15 feet of the basket, the feather begins to agitate. And in a few minutes, it rises 6 or 8 inches out of the basket and remains in the air for several minutes and then slowly settles back. I think one of the reasons perhaps why they've discontinued these ceremonies is because they annoy people. No one wants to believe these things these days. They want to believe that it's all one great mistake, and that it's due to the fact that these poor benighted souls are not wise enough or good enough to realize that materialism is the answer to everything. In any event, however, working with the Indians, you find a great many of these interesting and remarkable circumstances arising. I attended a graduation service at the American Indian School in New Mexico in the middle 40s. This was a graduation class for young Indians who had finished what would be equivalent to us as high school. In other words, they were speaking English. They had taken their examinations with the 3 R's and all this type of thing, and were very nice boys and girls. They were typical of a graduation exercise. They all lined up together on a stage, and the teachers were all there, but most of all the relatives were all there, and that's what really made the situation tremendous. Out from the reservation came all these mysterious-looking people, wrapped in blankets and hoods, wearing many types of jewelry, which were very beautiful jewelries, but very stoical with their long braided hair and all their native regalia. And a special section in front had been set aside for the happy and exalted relatives who were all there to see their children or their neighbors' children graduate from school. And it was a very impressive service. The diplomas were given out with great gusto, and the parents were beaming from ear to ear. They didn't clap because that was something they hadn't learned to do yet, but they were very pleased about the whole thing. And finally, at the end, the class valedictorian got up and made the speech. And the speech was the wonders of living in America. And it built up to a very great note in which these Indian children bestowed upon America in general all of the virtues of their own tribe. They were so fond of the wonderful friendliness, the wonderful kindness, the wonderful peace, and all this type of thing. The parents were all nodding enthusiastically in Navajo, but the audience at the back was made up of the Anglos, looked a little sheepish. But this is the way it is and was there. These people have a very wonderful and very sincere situation involving them at all times in everything that they do. We know several Indians who have gone quite far in their own tribal life, and most of them were very sad because there was no one to carry on. This was perhaps especially true here in the California Indian group. It was then here outside of Riverside that I saw the Indians perform the fire walking ceremony, which was forbidden. The Indian school at that time, that was many years ago, the school at that time had its own police composed of Indians, and these policemen were supposed to prevent any of these ceremonies from being performed. But the policemen joined in the conspiracy, and before it was over, they too were walking across the bed of coals. But down back of Riverside, in the ranch of a kindly Anglo, the old ceremonies were carried on for years. Everywhere you find the Indian, you find something of a mystical nature. But you try to understand him and what he stands for, you realize that the great secret of what he has is that he has not yet been spoiled. Many efforts have been made to do it. Everyone has tried desperately to get the Indian out of his own lifeway. But he has sort of clung to it, and even if the surface has been mutilated in one way or another, the depths have remained comparatively calm. He simply has a concept of life that enables him to be a natural mystic. He can, without any particular effort, do that which most psychics spend years trying to cultivate: the ability to pierce through into an inner communion with self. This communion is based largely upon natural law, for if you go inside of the individual deep enough, you're going to find reality. The inside of the person may not support his outside in all cases, because his outside is apt to be very seriously damaged or contaminated by his worldly situations. But in the inner part of his own life, he lives a very simple, honorable, clean life. And he has a secret tradition about how these things should be done. A few years ago, after the revolution in China, the communist revolution, a group of Tibetans came to this country and went down to New Mexico to see what Indians looked like. When they got there, they thought they were looking in a mirror, because these Indians looked exactly like themselves. The same turquoise jewelry, the same clothes, the same hair, the same facial features, and they might just as well have been looking at each other, which had quite a factor in assuming, or helping to assume, that there certainly was an Asiatic contact there, and probably had, at a very ancient time, a bit of migration from the mainland. The migrations are referred to in ancient literature in Tibet and China, particularly China, but the proofs have never been adequate. Also, the missionaries coming in down in there having their little difficulties, but for the most part, the missionaries in close to the Indian tribes have been pretty fairly spare people. One told me, a missionary who had spent 20 years there, had a little church on one of the pueblos, and he said, you see, they come to worship in the little church every Sunday morning, and then they go out back and perform all their own rituals. It never is interfered with anything. It's like the Chinese. If one religion is good, two is better. The more religions you have, the better chance you have of getting there. So they're very nice. Well, I said to this old man, he's an old priest, I said, what do you do when they do these rituals? Do you join? Well, he said, I don't say I join, but something tells me that I got to get someplace on the other side of the reservation and take care of a little private business. He's never interfered with them. And actually, as he told me seriously, he says there's some points so close to our own we wouldn't know where to start interfering. The native religions of these people are for the most part very good basic religions, very, very, very fine examples of integrities. Actually, the universe, therefore, consists of these three worlds. And in man, these three worlds are the three parts of himself: body, mind, soul. These are all aligned to their own realms. Each of these belongs to itself. The body is part of a great plan. The body is part of the world in which it exists. It lives in the world, it lives by keeping the laws of the world, and it continues for its appointed time. Within the body is the mind, and it is the mind that guides the body and makes possible that the body shall become improved. The mind helps to protect the body. It guards it against evils that might otherwise destroy it. And the instruments of the mind are sensory perceptions, by means of which man is warned of danger or given various ways of improving his life. The other part, the spiritual part, is very secret, very mysterious. It is not symbolized too much, but the great leader of this particular phase of existence is the Manado. The Manado is the great one, the eternal one. The Manado is the one who has his throne upon the North Pole, usually, or somewhere in its equivalent, on the top of one of the mountains of the reservations, apparently. But the Manado is the father of all that lives. And the father of all that lives has two messengers, the phoenix and the serpent. The phoenix bird carries the messages of the Manado to the mind of man and to nature. The serpent is the great earth principle which bears witness and sends up its messages to the mind. Therefore the outer life is protected by the serpent. The higher life is protected by the phoenix, or the sacred bird. This bird, of course, is definitely the same thing as the phoenix of our own philosophies. And incidentally, originally the eagle on the Great Seal of the United States was a phoenix bird. Therefore, the bird of divinity, the bird of transformation, the bird of regeneration, the bird of immortality, was not only part of the belief of the Indians, but in some way, maybe through Ben Franklin, who had a mind for those things, brought into the seal of the United States. Therefore, the seal stands as a phoenix symbol of regeneration, restoration, renovation, and transformation, to rise from the darkness of ignorance to the light of reality. The Indians also had sacred places all around through their various reservations and resources. Sometimes in the old days the Plains Indians just wandered from one place to another, but they also had their laws and their ways and their wisdoms, and everything depended upon the constant vigilance of the individual. I've talked to some Indians who are now part of our way of life, and they point out very carefully, very certainly, said, there's something very necessary. The fact that this is a great country with a tremendous complication of life and a tremendous opportunity to grow and to serve and to help, that there has to be some form of discipline. The discipline to keep the values, keep the integrities. With the loss of the discipline, the tribe in the desert or in the wilderness would soon disappear. For lack of discipline, every empire the world has ever built has failed, because the individual gradually became self-seeking, gradually became determined to use his world to attain his own private purposes. The Indian is protected against this because his world was not oriented so that private purposes could mean much. But in the large civilization, there has to be a transformation. We have to learn what the Indian learned when he fed the old and the young first. We have to learn of a great responsibility, and Confucius gave us a very great key to this, that a surviving civilization has to have its integrities. Now, how do we get these integrities? Can we pass laws for them? We can, but the laws will be broken in a moment. If we are out to find leaders, can the leader lead the rest? Very unlikely. The great tragedy of leadership is always the same. Helping people, as Shaw pointed out, is the world's most dangerous occupation. So what happens? The